Well, I guess it would have to begin in a two-room country school. I started doing little thing. I think the first thing I ever did in the public eye was reading "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," and not reading it, memorizing it. I was in first grade, and that kind of it was a bug that kind of bit me, I guess. And after the school burned down, we were sent into the city, and I went to North Park Junior High, and there I became interested in doing PA work. Somehow a teacher, dramatic teacher, Miss Canfield was her name. She discovered that I had some sort of a talent for something or other. So she'd put me on every morning on the announcements. So at 8 o'clock I would be on there on a little stool, standing up to this a microphone and saying good morning and going through all the announcements of the day. And that led to me being assigned to a job as school reporter for the Lockport radio station. It was being built at the time across the field from the school. And I used to sit in the classroom and look out the window and say, wow, I'd like to work there someday. And it so happened that I'm starting to do the school news, and we would go to the radio station each Thursday and do a live broadcast. And it was called Meet the Schools. And from there I got to know the people there at the station, and when I graduated from high school, it was an opening, and I started as a music librarian on the weekend, but then eventually got on the air. It helped. It was, you never knew back in those days, 250-watt radio station at the time, you didn't know how many people were really listening to you. And you would gauge that by having a contest, and a call-in contest, and that was always the way that you would say, oh, well, we do have people out there listening. Well, I had just finished a noon newscast and walked out of the studio, and into the station came a gentleman by the name of Carl Erickson. Carl said, Tom, I've been listening to you, and I'm wondering if you'd like to work at WBEN. I said, what? What? And of course, BEN was the station that I would, always dreamed of that. So anyway, make a long story short, I was hired, and I started out there in radio, and then I was lucky enough to win the audition for the SO reporter. And so I did the SO News, 11 o'clock, and in those days they did both news and weather. They didn't have a separate weatherman. So I was sort of eased into being a weatherman in addition to doing news, and kind of set the stage for what I did later at Channel 7. A booth announcer, and they wanted me to do weather and one newscast on the weekend. So I had to work, I think on Sunday. I had to go in and do the 11 o'clock news on Sunday. So, but basically, I was hired to do the weather and booth work. In December of that year, the program director said, I want to do a children's show, and I want you to do it. Well, at that time, Channel 7 already had Rocketship 7 in the morning, and now they were going to open up the afternoon, because at that point, ABC network wasn't programming anything of value to Channel 7 in Buffalo. So he said, we're going to put you on from 3:30 until 5. We're going to run 2 half-hour Supermans, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and you're going to be known as Commander Tom, and we'll get you in a military uniform and so on and so forth. This was Lyle Cook, who was the program director. This was his idea, and actually, if it hadn't been for him, I probably would never have dreamed I would be doing a children's show in addition to the weather. And it was funny, for years, people growing up have told me they never realized that Commander Tom also did the weather until he got older. And then somebody said, well, he does the show, he does both shows. But it was fun wearing both hats, because I had some credibility with doing the weather, and I also was able to communicate with the children and in their parents. So we had a wonderful built-in audience going into a newscast when we eventually went into the 6 o'clock and the 11 o'clock news. Well, they said we're going to change our format a little bit, and we're going to be a little bit more forceful in our approach to the news, and we're going to really pinpoint the weather. We're going to be there wherever, pinpoint the news and the weather. We're going to be there wherever there's news happening. We're going to be there, and we're going to cover it. And at that time, we were number 3 in the market as far as audience with news. As Irv oftentimes would say, we're number 4 in a 3-station market. It was pretty bad, the ratings when we first started. Believe it or not, I used to stand and pretend I was on TV when I was 17, 18 years old, and pretend I was doing the weather. So I don't know whether that helped experience-wise or not, but it kind of fell into place. I was very lucky, and I just fell into a little niche, a little part of the whole half hour. In those days, weather was at the end of the newscast, and I always used to laugh that Irv would obviously dominate the news up until, what was ever left over was sports and weather. Well, being at the end of the newscast, weather was sometimes a minute and a half, if I was lucky. And of course, being outside was another element that always added to it. So I think the whole secret of that eyewitness news concept with the weather outside was the fact that the weather was outside. Actually, it was a sponsor on Channel 7 that requested that we do the weather outside because he had seen it done in another market. And he said, if I'm going to sponsor this, and this was way back before the eyewitness news concept, if I'm going to do this, if I'm going to sponsor this, I want it done outside. So that was the reason why it was done outside. It was fun because I knew that people were watching and they were feeling sorry for me, and I knew it was only 2.5, 3 minutes, and I'd be out there, do it, and back inside. And so I think that in itself was a plus. The worse the weather, the more people watched, and vice versa. It just fell in place. It was neat. I did have a streaker one time on the weather. And I could see him coming out of the corner of my eye. This is when we had moved from Main Street, our location on the sidewalk on Main Street, because we had had too many people going by doing not nice things and trying to get on the air. And so we moved into the parking lot, and the camera stayed inside, and the garage door opened up, and I could, where I could see this guy, I could see a figure coming toward me. And I thought to myself, this guy doesn't have any clothes on. Well, at that point, the camera went back into the studio to do local temperature. So the poor guy ran by, never got on the air, got apprehended by the security people. And I can still see him sitting at the desk of the security desk afterward, shivering. And he said, I was supposed to get $10 for doing this from my buddy, but I won't get it now because I wasn't on the air. That was just one of the funny things that happened. Another time the alarm went off on my car when I'm doing the weather, and I said to myself, oh boy, and I could see the guard who's running over to the corner of my eye. He's running over to where the car was parked. I don't know whether somebody was fooling with it or it was just a malfunction, but a lot of funny things happened on the weather outside. I would have to say honestly, it was Irv. Irv made the difference. Irv was the glue that held everything together. He was the focal point, and even today we still hear that. That Irv. How's Irv doing? Where's Rick? But I think the two of them, Irv being the dominant figure that he was, not only in voice and his delivery, but I think that was, if there was any other secret, it was perhaps the gathering of the news the way we did. Eyewitness News was everywhere, it seemed, that we must have had 100 cameras on the streets, which we didn't. But I think it was a combination of Irv's dynamic personality and his voice and his deliverance, and Rick certainly added to it, and I was so lucky to be part of that trio because whatever little bit I contributed to Eyewitness News was minute in comparison to what the other two did. That we were everywhere. The cameras were like, we never missed a story. And we gave that impression at least. And I don't think there were many stories that we didn't cover anything big that was happening. We were there, and we didn't have a huge amount of camera people to do this. How it was done, I don't know. And of course, in those days, it was all on film, and this film had to be processed and it had to be edited. And my part of the whole newscast, I think that I also revere, was the fact that I was the voice over the Eyewitness newsreel. And you'd go in there at 15, 20 minutes before the airtime and you would rehearse. And if the film splices didn't break, you were all set. But we had oftentimes had, you know, with the film in those days, it was not a matter of everything being as smooth as what you would like it to be, especially with that type of operation, the film part. But all in all, when you look at it, it was just a combination of elements that hadn't been introduced to Buffalo before. The Eyewitness newsreel was completely and totally brand new, never thought of before. And if I could add one other thing, I think the theme song was also so important in that whole operation. I mean, people today still go, and of course they brought it back now, but the old dum, 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 and it was just, it became a part of the person that was watching. It was part of their everyday diet. We had to be on top of it. We had to know, and that's another reason I think why AccuWeather played an important part of the Eyewitness News operation. AccuWeather was dominant in its ability to forecast correctly. I mean, I remember one time when we first went on the air with Eyewitness News, AccuWeather, we had said it's going to rain at 4 o'clock over Rich Stadium, and it was during a football game. And I said to myself, boy, that's going out on a limb, but that's what they say, and I said it, and it rained at 4 o'clock. And that was one of those, you know, one of those things that variables that could have gone badly, but it didn't. It worked out. But so again, there is another element with the Eyewitness News format was the AccuWeather. That was program director's idea. Red Cook said we were going to put a children's show on in the afternoon. We want you to be the host. You're going to be known as Commander Tom. And we're going to run a couple of half-hour Supermans. We're going to run Bugs Bunny. We're going to have all the old Warner Brothers cartoons. That in itself, assured success, because you didn't get any better than Bugs Bunny and his crew, the Roadrunner, and all that. So there again was I played a very small part in that. I was just there in bits and pieces, but I just kind of brought everything together. And into a storyline. And then when we went with the puppets, my wife and I designed these puppets out of some our children's dolls and playthings that they had. My daughter never forgave me for taking Dust Mop away from her and making him into a puppet. But so it was things that I had done as a child, you know, little things, voices and things that I did growing up. And I was able to put them together and use them in Commander Tom. I started out as a Ike jacket, but then we went to color and we needed something a little more vibrant. Now, I'll tell you a cute story with that. I did a lot of appearances in Canada down through the years, a lot of parades and things. And one time I was in a parade and there was a Mountie off to the side. I could see him in uniform in the audience in the passing parade there as we were going by, and he saluted me, and I thought, oh, does he really think that I'm? And I felt about this big, but cute story. I think I approached both jobs in the same manner. I don't think I felt any differently doing the weather than I did doing Commander Tom. It was just that I wasn't Commander Tom when I did the weather. I was Tom Jolls, and when I did the children's show, I was Commander Tom. So I don't know, in my mind subconsciously I divided those two and became two different people, but I didn't really feel that was what I was doing. I just felt the same doing one as I did the other. I've heard that from many, many people. They would say, you come into our house every night, you're part of the family. And being on the air as long as we were, we had established ourselves as family. And I mean, jokingly, one lady one time said to me, you come into my bedroom every night. I said, oh, yeah. But that was it. I mean, we were had become so familiar with people. We were so lucky that the three of us stayed together all those years. And there were instances where any of us could have moved to another spot. And there were those opportunities, but nobody ever did. And being that we were that close, it came across that way on the television too. It came across as we were buddies, we were friends, we knew about each other's families. And that transposed into the audience, and the audience picked up on that. And so we indeed became a part of not only our family on the air, but we became a part of hundreds of thousands of people in the audience. And it was just a unique situation. I can recall many of the parades, and many of them being in Canada, where we were welcomed as much as that we would have been in this country. It was amazing. We had two different sets of audiences, being where we are, and as you know, the Canadian audience is so important. And we were very lucky to have had that as a backup too to us. I've seen too many people that were celebrities that brushed people off. And that to me was a no-no. You had to be the same guy that they saw on TV. You had to be that same person when they met you in person. And no, I think I have 6 children, and we had a set of twins, 2 boys, and it used to bother them a bit when we did a lot of camping when the kids were growing up. And it used to bother them particularly, and they'd say, Dad, why do people keep coming over and talking to you, strangers? And I said, well, that's part of my job. I tried to explain it to them, and they said, one time somebody came up to them, and they were 3 or 4 years old, and they said, what's your last name? And the twins said, nothing. They didn't want to have any part of that. But no, I think everybody accepted it. My wife never found it troubling, and to the most part, that was just part of it, and we accepted it and enjoyed it. And that was the part that I think, if anything, I would say I enjoyed the relationship that I would get from people coming up to me and talking to me. And still today, people will come up and say, hey, how's the weather? What's happening with the weather? And it's great. It's really neat. It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? I did that live every single night. It was never recorded, never pre-recorded or anything. And I tried to change it a little bit every night so it didn't come off the same way. But that was an effective piece of broadcast history too. Well, that again was an idea of our program director, Mr. Cook. He said, let's just point out the fact that possibly there are some people out there who don't know where their children are, that they are not home in bed like they should be perhaps, and just bring home the point. Let's try to be a little family-oriented, and maybe this will help somebody one day say, oh, wait a minute, I don't know where such and such is. Maybe I'd better investigate and find out more about what my children are doing and why they're not home at 11 o'clock. So I think that served a purpose. We certainly did our job as a public servant in relaying the news, but we also had an element of personality that I don't think you see so much anymore. I noticed that the banter between anchors, although it's attempted nowadays, could never match what Irv had going for him. He just had that unique way of picking up on something and conveying it as part of a family type presentation. In his ability to say, instead of just saying, well, here's the weather with Tom, he had always had some cute little phrase or cute little thing he would say, or some ribbing of me in some way that people loved to hear. And I remember one time doing a commercial for Wonder Bread during a blinding snowstorm. I have a loaf of bread in my hand, reading off the prompter, and it's snowing so bad that you can barely see me or the loaf of bread. And Irv came back and said, he always had a kicker at the end of the newscast, a funny joke, a funny story. And that night he ended by saying, if there's anything funnier than seeing a grown man doing a commercial for bread in a blinding snowstorm, I don't know what there would be. So he had this unique ability to pick up on things and find the humor in a great many areas. Oh, I think we had a built-in advantage. Yes, definitely, because we had had this experience where we were talking in a studio by ourselves with a microphone in front of us, but we still had developed some sort of a personality as a result of being on the air, whether we were a disc jockey or we did news or did sports or what. And I often think to myself that those days, or those 10 years or whatever it was that I spent in Lockport on the radio station just helped me immensely with developing my ability to convey and to converse with people that I didn't see. That's the funny part. It's you and me talking back and forth. There's a reaction, but doing it on TV or radio, it was all one-sided. You didn't know who was out there or what their reaction was to things. And to gauge that, I think, helped immensely with our radio background. Well, I think when you're transplanted to another area, it's bad enough to begin with when you don't know anybody. So you kind of grasp onto anything that you can possibly find that would be related to your hometown. And fortunately, we have the Bills and the Sabres, and we have a lot of other things that are, and food. There's no place you can go without buffalo wings. I mean, most of them are pretty bad. And when you see buffalo wings, you think, oh wow, in a restaurant in Florida, and the product is so bad. So I think it's that any connection you can find if you're in another area, if you can find somebody back here, you just get as close to those people as you can. And I found there's a restaurant I finally discovered in Florida that was run by Buffalonians. They had the beef on weck. They had the Assailants hot dogs. I shouldn't say that perhaps, but they have that, and that was it. That's what their whole basis for their operation was on the buffalo food. That was for me, and it just drove. Brought all these people from Western New York, found out about it, word of mouth, whatever. And you congregate in those things that are familiar to you, and I think that's what makes people do that. It's always, it's a wonderful experience that people remember. It's the greatest thing to have people say, hey, I remember Dust Mop, or I remember this. Do you remember when you did this? And to me, that bit of recognition makes my whole past worthwhile. If I have been able to instill in any person a bit of joy, a bit of entertainment, a bit of knowledge, then I feel as though I'm the luckiest guy in the world.